to do that, in our tradition, I have 4 points I want to make with you. The first one is really this notion of how design thinking can be applied to the coronavirus. And one of the things that the sequestering of everyone at home has created is a lot more time to do things, to make things, to be thoughtful, to be still. And this icon is one of those products of just thinking and then making images about that. And for me, the intersection of design thinking and mindfulness, which I like to think of as a mindful activity, and the pandemic is really an opportunity to thoughtfully apply the principles of design thinking in a mindful way to a global threat. And I chose to talk about a few of these attributes of design thinking this morning. None of this are ideas that you haven't heard before. They're quite common. I just wanted to bring them to the top of the pile and talk about them a little bit as we share our thoughts and our aspirations for solutions this morning. When we think about the mindfulness piece, the stillness piece, the meditation piece, that is really at the intersection of design thinking and meditation. And I think they're so connected that to be a thoughtful and potent design thinker, you do have to find that state of the ability to disengage, to put your biases aside, to breathe a little more deeply, and to, at least in my case, to detach from my preconceptions or my habitual ways of doing things, because in the moments that we are now in, there's no such thing as the habits that we used to have. We kind of chuckled at Atanas. He said his morning routine. I bet it's not the same morning routine as it was, 6 or 8 weeks ago. And so we are at the brink of a challenge to the way we all think and live right now. And one of the things I want to postulate this morning is that the things that got us here will not get us to the next place of a healthy globe. And so based on that, I wanted to share 4 ideas plucked from the design thinking toolkit and talk a little bit about them. The first one is who doesn't know this all day long if you're a design thinker? It's the idea of the divergent and convergent process. And I think that this is so critical now. I wish we could, inoculate the world with a few of these ideas, because in this era where we're seeking solutions so desperately to both, medicine and supplies and masks and food and things, our reactive mind is much more convergent than normal, and we feel a sense of such urgency that we're not able to let our minds come to a restful spot where we can think broadly without fear. And so this idea of first diverging, generating ideas without figuring out how they can't work, it is critical right now. The notion, the gift of divergent thinking, of idea generation, is that we're able to see what we haven't been seeing, to think what we haven't thought, to imagine what we haven't had to imagine. And every day in the papers that we're all reading, I'll read a headline about, say, the federal government's response to the pandemic, and I am so critical, of our president that anything he says, I'm just judging it. And uh, that's kind of an extreme example to use him as somebody that I should not be judging. But even so, if I'm not able to have a divergent, open mind and consider things, then we won't make any, not just me, the world, we won't make any meaningful progress because the solutions and our way through the pandemic are using things that we haven't used before. Even the idea of social distancing, which, if we joke about advanced common sense as the basis of design thinking, even social distancing is so habitually difficult for people that it's hard to do. And I've seen photographs of people walking along the Embarcadero at the waterfront in San Francisco on a Sunday stroll, just shoulder to shoulder. And I think to myself, well, I think, what are they thinking? But I also think how difficult it is to be able to detach from our preconceptions and just think a little bit differently. So the diverge-converge mental model is so helpful to us because we can imagine broadly without figuring out why it won't work. Clearly, we have to embrace some big ideas that have never been done before and make them work. And so the diverge-converge construct, in service to the social and medical and economic problems we have today, is, I think, a very big and useful tool. So my next idea to share with you is the idea of the comfort with ambiguity. Again, such a present need right now. So many people are me among them, reverting to the yearnings for what used to be. Why can't I just jump in my car and drive to the restaurant, whatever or fill in the blank? And the future, even the present, is so ambiguous right now. I don't know what is right. I don't know how to behave. I don't know how to get food. I don't know how to visit with people. I don't, there's so many things that we are unclear about. The ambiguity of how the virus spreads, the ambiguity about what a solution might look like in terms of both medical delivery, hospital capacity, social norming, it's also unclear. And for most people, give me the clarity of a bad idea versus the ambiguity of searching for a new one. And I think that this is a real design thinking skill, certainly, to be able to be at peace, at stillness, amid the chaos, and amid not knowing. The third idea of the four I want to share with you is the idea of reframing the problem. And again, for most of us, this is almost second nature. But when applied to the larger framework of the global pandemic and how to see it a little bit differently and understand potential solutions is so critical. If all you have is a hammer, everything has to look like a nail. And by reframing, by being able to see a problem from a stillness, from a place of a little bit of remove, a circuit breaker perhaps between one's daily anxiety over the coronavirus and how we're reacting to it, is the challenge to be responsive, not reactive. By that I mean my straight-on reactions to things are often emotional, impulsive, and very fast. And my response to things, when I'm able to to breathe, to separate, to detach, and to be able to see myself outside of the context of being just me all the time, I'm able to see things differently, to in fact reframe. And an example of that, I think Sophia said this earlier, that how can we make use of this time? What might we do? What relationships could we repair? Could we expand? Could we grow? What opportunities does this create? And I'm not saying this in the way of being Pollyanna-ish, of being, everything is beautiful. Well, everything isn't. But even amid a crisis, there are opportunities for us to connect, to share, to create, and to. This is the thing that I've been so struck by, is how still my house is. It's my wife and me here, and we live, thankfully and gratefully, in a fairly green wooded area, and so it's quite easy to step outside and sit down and meditate, or just relax, or listen to a sound that isn't always present today, which is the sound of birds, not drowned out by the freeway, not drowned out by airplanes and cars passing by, but just being so connected to nature and the systems that govern life on Earth. And I know I have found in reframing the inconveniences, I'll say that in air quotes, of the crises we're in, to find those moments of stillness and gratitude, and to be so humbled by the power of things that we can't control. And this reframing skill is helpful to see things not only as a terrible inconvenience and a takeaway and a denial of the way I used to live. There's different ways of seeing that, which brings me to the last point I want to share with you, which is our innate capacity as creative people to have new ideas, to be generative, to be creative, and to find exciting ways and beautiful ways of finding new ideas, new solutions, new pathways through what seems like a road littered with obstacles and fears. The capacity for us, and I'll just frame it in as creative people, because I think we're all design thinkers, and whether you go through a class or not, it's innately humane and human. But the idea that we can be spirited generators of new possibilities in this critical time, but also as a, I'm just pulling all of this from what we do we've done in the past, and we will do in the future. But in this context of today, the ability of us, and I say us on the phone, and I mean us as a species, when we can get detached enough to think about it this way, we actually do have immense capacity to create new solutions, to imagine new stories of the future, to imagine a new pathway through the pandemic. And I heard last night our governor here in California say that under different modeling conditions, the prediction of the healthcare system in California is that 54% of Californians will have been infected by the virus by the time it runs its course. And I appreciate the governor's capacity to say something like that, which is politically, a suicide in a certain way. But it's true. It's science. And it's a big idea with a narrative behind it that tells us, and I'll just speak about it in the things I know, which is the state I live in. It tells us that this is real, this is serious, and maybe ignoring the shelter-in-place orders, ignoring social distancing, is stupid. It's a technical term. So the governor's ability to create a new narrative, that to tell things the way that they are, and allow us to then problem solve and reframe our daily life using the ideation capacity and our innate ability to create workarounds, to create new ways of doing things. And I think, just to close, I think so often about, because I'm old and my parents were in World War II and in the Depression, and the stories that I heard as a child of how uh, the United States, at least, I mean, I don't know other stories, was able to rally around a single purpose and put everything into that effort to conserve materials, to use them twice, to support the efforts of the Allies to win that war, is inspiring, and it inspires me even today to think about how when we all are imagining a different course for our lives and our communities and our families and our nations and our world, that we can bend the arc of history. And so with all of these tools we have and our capacity to do work together, even in these conditions, I find that the intersection of stillness and uh, and creativity is a combination that gives me a lot of power and inspiration for the compassionate pathway through the virus. And I think I'll stop there.